Hey everybody, Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development, and great to have you with us. And we've got the privilege today of having Joe Hillis, who's the Operations Director at the Information Technology Disaster Resource Centre. Hey Joe, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, I'm excited because I was looking at the website, which I'm just actually going to bring up and share right now, the website for your centre. Because it'd be great for people to have a look at it and understand some of the things that you do. And so there's a great amount of information on here, some of the operations that you guys do, how to partner with you as well. And I just think it's a great thing that you do. So, Joe, why don't you tell us how you became interested in emergency management and a bit of your career and experiences to date?
Long career, long story. Jumped into actually started in EMS, back a long time ago, and that eventually led to the fire service. So enjoyed a long career, about 24 years in the fire service, and part of that was having the ability to work on my days off, and that's how I kind of got involved with technology. So I,
Mm,
happened to become the resident tech guy for the city, and was helping the police department pull their reports for their crime reporting, and helping implement our first CAD system for the fire department, and the radios and the other thing with that. But somewhere along the way, I feel like I kind of got voluntold to help develop the city's emergency plan. And me being a tech guy, I reached out to our state emergency management agency, and back then they graciously sent me a emergency plan on a floppy disk, and I knew how to use search and replace. So I, wrote my first emergency plan in about 15 minutes. Which is really not true, and I mean it's sort of true, I guess. But that was kind of my I was a shift commander at the fire department, and knowing that pretty much anything that happened in that city was going to rest on my shoulders, I really did want to understand more about
mm,
how to be prepared for that. So
yeah.
I wanted to know the manager's cell phone number or telephone number after hours, for the local lumber store in case we needed to get shoring for something. Understanding having those relationships with our Red Cross and things like that. So that was kind of my introduction to it, and I guess subsequently had the opportunity to learn more in the space, and then the exercises started, and that's when I realized that plan was no good. It was just words on paper, and that until I tested that plan and I had some failures in there, that was it. So that's the long and the short, of how I got involved with emergency management. And so it obviously, doing tech as well, this was kind of we're going to call it a retirement gig, was to be able to take my adrenaline background and match that with my tech skill set, and then
Mm.
try to use that for good. And so anyway, that's here I am today.
That's a great summary, and search and replace is a very powerful tool to get stuff done. Um, You mentioned that, once you started to get involved in the exercises, you realized that the plan maybe needed some modification. Can you give us some of those examples? Because I think emergency managers often find this planning is fantastic, and then there's reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think from, when you're in smaller, even in any area, you're competing for the same resources, right? Depending on what the event is, you may be competing with your neighboring cities, departments for the same resources. So if a tornado comes through, and it's a long track, I mean, whatever that is, I don't know if you have those over there, but here it could be 26 miles long, right? And so there's a finite number of resources that we're all going to compete for, and whether that's beds in a shelter, whether that's portable radios, whether that is tarps for homes, whatever that is. I think we all think just like fuel, right? I mean, I do in my present work, we do a lot of hurricane work. And so, one of the first things that happens is kind of the fuel supply chain kind of gets interrupted during that. And so, in order for us to be able to go into an area, we have to have contracts with fuel vendors. But what we've also learned is the fuel vendors may not be able to deliver. So there's always, having a plan B, having a second, an alternate fuel vendor, or having a
Right.
relationship with somebody else to do that. So easy examples, but I mean, I think, even the best laid plans don't necessarily always go off as we think. So, and one more thing I'll tell you is just like sheltering. We assume that and it's not that we assume, but I mean, there are organizations that they're responsible for sheltering. But if they can't get their volunteers into an area because of a flood or something like that, then you have no shelter plan. Seen that many, many times, in the last dozen years or so here.
Mm. Why don't you tell us about what you do on a day-to-day basis with the resource center?
Oh, well, I sit I'm an operations director is kind of the title, but it's really just jack of all trades. I mean, it's everything from, like we're doing now, which is to kind of socialize the mission, to educate in both emergency management and the industry as well. So we keep one leg kind of in the tech sector and we keep one leg in the emergency management space. And we just want to make sure that we're connecting with all of the industry resources that are going to be available to communities after disaster. The other flip side of that is we want to drive those relationships with emergency management in advance of a disaster, because I'm sure it's cliche.
Mm.
We just wrong time to exchange business cards, right? In the middle of a disaster. So I spend a lot of time with that. I spend a lot of time on the preparedness piece, keeping our fleet, equipped, replace. We always have equipment coming in and out. So, right now we have about 67 maybe active events. And these go back actually in some
Wow.
cases several years to previous hurricanes and things like that. But we have around 1,200, just under 1,200 open sites, as we call them. So these are places where we may be providing connectivity, we may be providing notebooks for recovery or whatever that is. So I mean, it's just a constant, it's a constant grind to try to keep up with that. Obviously, we have leaders, regional and divisional leaders that are able to kind of help with some of that load. But I think understanding they're all working day jobs, right? They've already got their 60-hour a
Right.
week work jobs and families at home, and they're going to school or doing their thing. So ultimately, I mean, it kind of falls back to me to do that. And of course, we're a volunteer driven organization, so we have about 2,800 volunteers around North America. So it is kind of working on the strategies with them, and whether it's training, recruitment, or whatever that is. So
Mm. So when you say 67 active events, 1,200 open sites, at different events, there may be more than one location where you're supporting with resources?
correct. So just take our most recent Hurricane Ida, which is Southeast Louisiana. We had about 92 or 94 sites just related to that hurricane. Some of them were super quick, open and close, as in, provide charging stations and Wi-Fi in community centers until the power came back or until, cellular came back or whatever that was. So some of those cases are open and shut. But other cases they're remote, and it takes a longer time. There are still areas, we're 60 days post hurricane, and there's still areas that do not have wireline communications back up. So we're still providing temporary communications there until they can get their regular infrastructure restored.
So what are some of the skill sets that people have that you need that people who might be willing to volunteer who are watching this?
Really any communication. Well, first of all, I mean, we're an organization like anybody else. So, I mean, we have, whether it's marketing, whether it's storytelling, whether it's, finance, CPA, legal, logistics, but, our all the magic happens really with our volunteer workforce, the tech skills. And many of them work for the most recognizable names in the industry. And, so they're able to, get a week or two off or take a week or two off from work to come out, deploy into the field with us. And, we take care of them pretty much door to door and get them back. So skill sets, I mean, it can be anything from, radio communications, which we don't, that's we're more of an IP focused. So we do a lot of Wi-Fi, we do a lot of Ethernet infrastructure, a lot of satellite communications, cellular, mobile broadband, things like that. So, but we have also technical and functional analysts, people that work in their day jobs or project managers. And, it's not uncommon
Hmm.
for us to get a request from a state EOC to have somebody who can come in and help them manage a dashboard, how many beds are open, how many people are in these
Right.
shelters and things like that. So really any kind of technical skill set is welcome here. And the other piece of it is you get to work with some rock stars, and you get to learn other skills here. So this is a good
Mm.
networking place as well.
I was speaking with John Dames from Project earlier today, and I was amazed with some of the things that he mentioned about how technology has become far more portable. The reach is much better, it's more reliable, and can be deployed a lot quicker,
Mhm.
particularly in disaster situations. What's really stuck out to you over the last few years with some developments that have happened that have made life easier for you guys to respond in times of need and things that are developing now that you're looking forward to using in the future in tech?
There's been some great communications advances, whether it's interoperable communications, whether it's the new, low Earth orbit satellites, which are, promise faster, more reliable connections. But also the artificial intelligence, the machine learning is something that is promising, and I look forward to it. Now, what I can say is that there are more tools out there. There's much more, there are more tools available than most emergency managers can actually effectively use or consume. And whether that's scraping social media to find where pockets of people might have collected after an event, to estimating debris, how many cubic yards of debris. The algorithms now, or the imagery right now, is good enough to be able to identify how many refrigerators are laying on the side of the road. And I realize that's not it's not
Wow.
something most emergency managers care about, but when you're trying to understand how many dump trucks do I need, to
Yes.
how many weeks or months is it going to take for us to pick up all this debris. And obviously flood debris is going to have different characteristics than wind debris. So if it's trees laying on the ground versus things that have floated and flooded, or through flooding. So I
Mm.
think there are some neat things there, but most EMs are kind of under resourced as far as not having enough people to be able to just continuously look at that data, and to be able to consume it, to make actionable decisions on it. But that's where my hope is. My hope is now that we know some of the things we're looking for. We've done some not only street level imagery, but some aerial imagery for some cities and counties and states, to where they could just take that imagery and use it to understand how many bridges are impacted, how many street
Mm.
signs are impacted, things that they don't necessarily have to go back out and redrive all that. But it's something you can take that imagery and give it to Public Works Department, and let them figure out how many of my street signs burned up. So there are a lot of really great technology advancements, I guess, that are not only here but in the pipeline, that are getting better. And I think they're going to enable, and certainly um, progressive emergency managers. I think they're going to be good tools for them. But right now, we just don't necessarily have the cycles to be able to analyze that stuff to but historically, that's one of the other things you should say is, if you have a road that continuously floods, it can predict when how long this road is going to be blocked, for example, before emergency workers are able to traverse that road again. So I think those are some neat things where the tools can help. But again, it's just making sure you have enough resources or cycles to be able to, action that data.
Mm. So debris estimation, imagery to save having to physically go out, save time,
Mhm.
prediction,
Mhm.
like road closures. That's really interesting stuff. Can you tell us about some of the experiences over your period of time there that the centre's been involved in responding to?
Wow, I mean, stories, right? I have a long career in this world. From my fire service days, obviously, lots of different uh, interesting things, challenges, I guess, that we did, from large plane crashes to just technical rescue type things. But I think where I've been challenged the most really is doing what I'm doing now. And I know it's probably going to sound a little bit odd, but there's two things that I knew when I was a firefighter. Number one, I could pick up that microphone and request almost anything, and it would show up. I didn't know how the sausage was made. I didn't know who they called. I don't know how many times they had to call, whatever it was. But all I know is I could request something, it would show up. And I also knew that tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, some guy in a fresh uniform was going to show up and relieve me, and I was going to go home for 2 days. When I got into this side of it, the community, the disaster relief side of it, I mean, it's just you. It's just, I mean, it's just you, but I mean, you don't have all those resources. Those resources go
Mm,
home, they go back, and they're prepared for the next emergency because those emergencies continue to come. But things move at a totally different pace in this, I guess, on the emergency management side or on the recovery side, if you will. So, whether it's been challenges of, you know, we Hurricane Maria, for example, I think it hit around Halloween time, October, for us, and then in January there were still places, there were still 911 centers without communications, and how, in my mind, it's we could we freak out with a two hour outage, and they've been without communications for months, and so it
mm,
constantly I don't, amazes me that the things we take for granted, we think that most communities, cities, states, counties, whatever that is, have the resources to help themselves, but the reality is they don't. And so the things that I've seen have all been things that I worry about. How could they go for so long without the resources they need, whether it's computers, whether it's people, whether it's radios, communications, telephones, things like that. So I don't know, that may not have answered. It wasn't the explicit excitement, adrenaline driving type stuff. And I have all those stories, but I think for, who we're talking to right now, I think I want to set expectations that, there are going to be an overwhelming number of tasks, of things that you need to pay attention to, that things that you have not thought about that are going to come up, and whether it's pockets of your population that need things,
mm.
or whatnot. I mean, there's going to be a lot of things you never thought about,
Right.
in this industry. So
Yeah, let me ask the question in a different way. I think it was the way that I just phrased the question there, Joe. So I'm just looking at the website, and there's Hurricane Ida and Afghan resettlement. There's the wildfires, COVID response as well, that's happening right now. These different projects or events that you're involved in. Can you share with us some of those events or experiences that you've had in your role with going out and responding?
yeah, so obviously I have a natural affinity to the fire side of it.
Right. Yep.
For the last couple of years, last 2, 3 years, the western part of the United States, and I know you've had your share as well there. But what we've seen is that these fires have grown very, very large.
Mm,
They're increasingly remote and rural, and there are not necessarily communications resources there. The incident command folks do the best that they can with what they have, as far as communications. There's a lot of, oftentimes, slow, latent satellite connections to help them, but that doesn't necessarily allow the mapping folks, the GIS folks, for example. I mean, those are your biggest consumers when it comes to data usage, in there. And so for us to be able to go out and do things like, connect into fiber at a cell tower and do a 16-mile microwave shot to the edge of a, mountain that we can send down into a valley to make sure that they have, a gigabit of data to work with. Those are some technical challenges that we do, to help the fire service and the forest service and whatnot. The Afghan resettlement, they just wholesale brought a whole lot of people to these military bases, and their challenges were, is the military bases are historically rural. They don't have Wi-Fi there, and if they do have connectivity, it's basically secure net for for the military command staff, if you will. So having to create Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere, that you can have, I think we've had 48,000 clients on our Wi-Fi networks across 4 bases in the last
wow.
2 months. So, I mean, these are significant events, and we've had to go to industry to ask them, for bigger equipment. Can we borrow this equipment, so we can, connect these networks up? but there's not really, I mean, that's the one thing, we will, in the tech space, you'll find a lot of folks that are willing to do really cool things from their desktops where they can leverage their volunteers from home. But ours is we deal with the physical side of connectivity, and so somebody's got to get out there and stand on a ladder and hang an access point and
Right.
string cable from place to place, or fiber, or whatever that is. So I mean, those are a couple of examples of things going on. Of course, with hurricanes, again, I think I mentioned the phases. Immediately after, power is going to be down for a period of time. Communications are going to be down. The people all, this is a piece of advice I really like to give to the up and coming emergency managers, and that, if you can do things to reassure the public, and you will bring down the temperature of a community, because you think about this, every one of those people in Southeast Louisiana has somebody somewhere else in the world that's worrying about them, and they're feverishly
Mm,
trying to get in touch with them to find out, are
right.
you okay? In the same breath, the people that the thousands, I mean, actually tens of thousands of people who lost their roofs, who are no
Mm,
longer able to stay at home, they're in some cases sleeping out of their car, or
right.
whatever that is. They want to be able to let their family know, hey, I'm okay. This is where I am. This is how you get in touch with me, or whatever that is. So communications are so important after a disaster. And I realize it's really super simple for emergency management to, I mean, we all have redundancies, right? I mean, we have our own two-way radios, we got backup repeaters, we got mobile command centers with satellite dishes, whatever. That's to take care of the emergency. So we've got to think about taking care of the people.
Mm,
And rebuilding a cellular or a wireline infrastructure is a months-long project. It's not, they don't just, they just don't bring a deployable in and then all of a sudden everybody's connected again. So it's making sure that you're looking out for the folks on that. And I hope that answered your question.
yeah, that's really good. And I was going to ask you about what aspiring emergency managers who might look to be involved in your area should build into their toolkit in terms of knowledge and experiences. What else have you got besides that ability to think about reassuring the public?
I think there's a couple things. I would say that, seek out somebody, one of the old guys who's been in this, for historically, emergency management has always been the, retired fire guy, who's on this last few years, and, has always done it, his way, or whatever that is, but didn't necessarily have, a degree in emergency management. So
Mm,
they had the school of hard knocks, I guess, as they say. They have that type of experience, but they don't necessarily have the supporting. They don't have as much the theory behind it. They don't have what you're teaching them today, and more about how to, leverage more of these, government resources, private sector resources, and whatnot. I mean, it really is about continuing. Relationships is probably key. It is number one. That's the best thing I think I could tell you is you're going to have your book work. I say this, and I'm probably going to get called out on it, but dare I say, 90% of emergency managers in America have never really run a disaster, and I was one of them. So just because we hold the title and just because we have the certificates on the wall doesn't mean that we spent 6 months, rebuilding our community, or 2 years rebuilding our community after a disaster. There's
mm,
historically a mass exodus, it seems like, after these significant events, and we lose a lot of legacy knowledge. So I will say that
that's
relationships
good.
are your key, and whether it's that, just knowing that manager at the retail store, or knowing that VP at your biggest employer in town, who may have programs or resources they can bring to bear for you, those are key. And I would also say, again, seek out mentors who've done this for a number of years. You can teach them the theory side, but let them teach you the school of hard knocks, when it comes down to,
Yep.
this is the way we did it back in the day type thing.
That's great. So those mentors from the School of Hard Knocks,
Yeah.
building those relationships, maybe with the people who run large organisations and might have resources, and think about reassuring the public, the public side, the heart side of the response.
Yeah, I think those are, to me, those are important. Those are things I wish people would have, conveyed to me early on. Um,
Mm.
So, but I mean, we eventually get there. We eventually find out the people who can do it, and you'll see that people will step up and offer things to you. And that's one of the things that ITDRC is able to do, is we try to help these communities capture those offers of assistance. So, you will find that, and I'm sure you've read the anecdotal stuff where, you may have a catastrophic event somewhere and people are offering you truckloads of blankets in August. And that's not what we need. We don't need truckloads
Right.
of blankets. We don't need coats. We don't need things like that. But in the same breath, chances are really good come October, November, you're still not going to be whole again. And you want to capture that offer because your community is going to need those resources. So I think it's a matter of, make sure that you don't tell anybody no until you've had a good year to work in recovery, and then you can tell them no if that's the way it works out. So.
Right. Look, Joe, I do want to thank you for spending your time and sharing your experiences with us. This has been really great for me. I've learned a lot. And I do want to thank you for the work that you're doing and the volunteers who work with you and the way that you respond to people's needs in disaster situations and emergencies. It's really of need. And just to give you some context on why I think what you're doing is really important. I lived in Indonesia for 7 years, and every year, like clockwork, there were floods, there were earthquakes, there were all sorts of situations that the local environment, the organizations involved were not prepared for, even though by clockwork, and I've been there 7 years, we knew that this was coming. And so as citizens or people living there, residents, we could think and be prepared and build up some stores. But, when the cell towers go down and my family back in New Zealand was wondering, is Craig okay? No one turned up to set up a mobile Wi-Fi so I could check in. And so I had to wait until I could go somewhere that was actually accessible through the flood to get a connection, to check in maybe on Facebook or Twitter and
Right.
check in with one of those I'm okay check-ins so that my family knew that I was all right. And that wasn't available in that particular country, or particularly where I lived. And so what you do really does matter. What you do is really important. And I love that you mentioned, number one, reassuring the public and those connection with family and friends. It's wonderful. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate you sharing our story.
How can people reach out to you if they want to connect, volunteer?
ITDRC.org. I think most everything is on there down at the bottom. They have an opportunity to volunteer from there. There's obviously the giving page, and they're welcome if there are other, questions about that. I mean, hit us. We have an email on there, partner@itdrc.org. So if there's ways we can help you, or vice versa, I mean, obviously we'd love to have that conversation. So itdrc.org.
Wonderful. So if everyone who's watching the recording and our students, if you'd like to volunteer, underneath this video on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, there is the link to Joe on LinkedIn, and I'll be adding the links as well to the center to make sure that that's available for everybody. And if you're an emergency manager, just like we talked about, you're always training, you're always learning new things, but maybe you don't have that academic degree that recognizes all the training that you've done, or maybe you've done your degree, but you just haven't had time to do a master's. So with uard.org or uard.ac.nz, what we offer is a way to recognize all of that experience and the training that you've done, give you academic credit so you can get a bachelor degree or a master's degree much faster, anywhere, anytime, from anywhere in the world. So reach out to us if you'd like to grab a qualification and to do it in a way which is on your terms. So thanks for being with us, and thanks, Joe, as well. I really appreciate you and the work that you do.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.